We're ready for the CTA report. Ms. Rodriguez?
Good evening. There was an unscheduled speaker form that was filled out, and I wanted to know whether Chris would be able to speak.
It will be addressed before we do the agenda.
All right, then I'll go ahead and just give you my report and leave that alone. Good evening, and happy February. Tonight you're going to be voting on a few things that we have some interest in as a union, and I wanted to highlight a couple of those things. The first is the 2016-17 calendar, and I have communicated with all of you individually about the calendar, but I did want to say it publicly that we were a part of the calendar process, and I was very pleased with how that process took place. As you know, there are many considerations when creating a calendar, and most of the time you can't make really anybody happy. I think Sue Renew used to say that all the time, like the calendar is like the worst committee to ever be on. This calendar, from our perspective, addresses all of the major issues that we had with last year's calendar, and we feel like it's actually a pretty good calendar. So we urge your support of the calendar. And I believe Mr. Ingersoll and I had a private conversation about future calendars, and so you just keep those things in mind, Mr. Ingersoll. There are a couple of things on the personnel agenda tonight that obviously are of interest to us, and I have a whole long list of I guess, things to say. I guess one thing I do want to talk about is recruitment and retention again. At some point, maybe I'll be able to come and talk about something other than that. I'm on a statewide task force for recruitment and retention, and one of the things that we're doing is collecting district-by-district data to look at the issue. It's not just an issue in our district, obviously. It's an issue in 67 districts in this state. It's a national issue, actually, as well. Recruiting young people into the profession of teaching, helping them become successful once they're here, and helping them stay and decide that this is a career they're going to stay in for the long haul. It's no coincidence to me, anyway, that in 2011 our state stopped collecting statewide recruitment and retention data from the districts. If you think about 2011, that was the year that 736 went through, and they got rid of continuing status for teachers and ushered in annual contracts for everyone who started at that point. So why keep collecting data when they knew what was going to happen, which is exactly what we had said was going to happen. We would just continue to have this revolving door of teachers. I do hope that we can be part of some type of plan that is a recruitment and retention plan that is specifically designed to look at the green zone schools, but all of our schools. We are still anxious to see some kind of plan. I know that there are discussions of recruitment and retention at a lot of different levels in the district, and I hope that we can actually sit down and have that recruitment and retention meeting where we're part of that and talking about what we need to do going forward. Because if you look at your agenda tonight, you'll see quite a few resignations. We're going to see continued retirements, and we are not bringing in enough people to fill those positions, and statewide, but in our district, and that's really because we live here. We have to worry about where we are. I mentioned the personnel agenda, and like I said, I do have a bunch of stuff written down, but I think what would be best is if I just speak to you from my heart about the personnel agenda and the kinds of things that are on there. G. McGuire is going back to work on Tuesday, and I am thrilled that that is going to happen. I think that we have to, as a district, think about checks and balances and why we as a union exist, why you as a board exists, why there's a separation between the superintendent and the board, why we have a human resources department, and the roles of all of those people. And in a system where the checks and balances fall apart is where we get really bad decisions that get made. And we don't always have to go to the mat We don't always have to fight. We don't always have to make everything so difficult. 9 months ago is when Jean's ordeal started. 9 months ago. And what the district has lost in those 9 months is a wonderful teacher who could have been with kindergarten kids this entire time. Like I said, I'm thrilled that she's going back to work. She's thrilled that she's going back to work. But what's actually happening is everything that we brought to you is going to take place. She's going to receive all the accommodations she's entitled to. Kids are going to have her services. She's going to be able to finish out her last year of teaching and retire with the dignity that she deserves. And the checks and balances that should be in place, I think we're getting there. But we have to make sure that the people making decisions aren't the people that are reviewing the decisions and making recommendations about decisions, because that is what checks and balances are for. I believe that this is one of those times when our district, it kind of was a perfect storm of really bad things happening at the same time. So I'm grateful that she's going back to work. There are 2 other items on your agenda. One is costing the district $72,000. That's another example of the checks and balances that weren't in place regarding decisions. And I hope that you will think about that as well. And there are 2 other items that I have addressed with you all individually as a group, or brought to your attention, and one that got pulled off the agenda. And I think, again, what I said before, which is when we don't have checks and balances in place and the same people that make the decision about something are the ones then charged with reviewing the decision and then providing guidance or information to others that make decisions, it's really hard to separate that. And when things are looked at with a new set of eyes sometimes, like I believe happened in the Jean McGuire situation 9 months after it should have, better decisions are made for the good of everyone. So I'm going to leave it at that, but we need to continue to maintain that system of checks and balances where you all actually look at what you're given with a fresh set of eyes. And principals and HR and legal don't look necessarily to protect a decision that's made, but look to make sure that the best decision gets made. So that was all I wanted to say to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. CWA report? Seeing no one, we will go ahead and adopt the agenda, and then we will have our unscheduled speaker. Mr. Superintendent.
Recommend the board approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Board members, we have a recommendation from the superintendent. Moved by Ms. Hawley.
Second.
Second by Dr. Mills. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Ms. Hill?
Good evening, Chairperson Hensley, board members, and Superintendent Gent. Thank you for allowing me to speak to this issue that's on the consent agenda tonight. I would like to address an item on that agenda, the suspension without pay of Kathy Costa. Mrs. Costa is a 26-year veteran of the St. Lucie County School District with a deep care for her students and a spotless record as to her professionalism. Ms. Costa is in the boardroom tonight. She designed the community-based instruction program for students with disabilities who have aged out of high school. She designed this program to give her students the skills necessary to become contributing members of society, to be able to shop, go to a restaurant, and hold down a job. As the program is community-based, It requires that students take regular field trips into the community, as there is no money to have a permanent bus driver assigned to these students. She herself obtained a license to drive the bus. We acknowledge that the incident for which she is facing this suspension occurred, but the punishment does not fit the crime. Even the Department of Children and Families found no reason for action after investigating what happened on that day. She's been out of the classroom since that day, robbing her students of her expertise. This surely is an injustice. There's no precedent for a first-time offense to receive a 5-day suspension. There's a huge difference between making a mistake and an intentional act. This certainly was not an intentional act, and no student was injured during the incident. We should not punish someone for something that could have happened but didn't. A 5-day suspension without pay is a discipline that is way over the top for this offense. We ask the board to consider all the facts, remove this item for the consent agenda tonight, and look at the whole picture. When a student makes a mistake, teachers are always careful to make sure that the discipline fits the offense so that the student learns from that mistake and can go on. If you allow the suspension to go through, it sends a message to all employees. It doesn't matter how long or how exemplary years you've spent here in the district. If you make one mistake, you're out. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hill. Board members, we have the superintendent's recommendation of approval of consent items. Do we have any items that need to be declared as issues of conflict, or any items to be removed from the agenda for separate vote or discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Hilson, second by Ms. Hawley. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0.